Oh,
It's like Slate, right?
That's exactly what it is.
That's what that is, right? Yeah.
That's exactly. Because,
okay.
I mean, look, honestly, at the end of the day, because it's over the internet and there's dropouts and shit, it's not going to be completely in sync, and it might drift at some point. But so far, it's been okay. I think the only time it didn't work was, ironically, and this is so sad, but when Bader was on, he had the whole setup, Pro Tools and everything.
Right.
And for some reason, that didn't lock in. And I think it has something to do with Pro Tools audio recording versus Zoom audio recording, like a frame rate video.
Yes.
thing.
Yeah. I've had some huge Zoom issues as far as like sync. But like
Really?
Fortunately, it doesn't really matter for me. But because I don't really have to sync what's going on, but
Sync in terms of like visual.
well, it just timing stuff just it fucks up, and really just because Zoom is not made for pro audio,
right?
And that's all there is to it.
Right.
And if you try to integrate pro audio into it, it just doesn't like doing it.
So weird. I know they were trying to do that, especially with the whole pandemic and stuff.
Right. They've definitely. I've watched them step up the game in the past year, but still not there.
Yeah. So it's funny because like SAE was telling us like how, like when the whole thing started off, we did classes on Canvas. It's called, and
yeah. I went to SAE, so I had that.
And they still okay. So they were still using Canvas then.
Yeah.
So
we didn't have videos on Canvas, but we used Canvas.
You didn't? Ah. So there is a video feature now with Canvas,
okay.
But then, there was no way to transmit pro audio, like high fidelity audio through.
Right.
It was just
right because it's made for just people to talk to each other.
Exactly. So they
don't really give a shit.
And a bunch of teachers were like, "Well, I'm gonna stream on YouTube and Twitch, and then the students can watch it there, and then we'll discuss shit on Canvas or Zoom."
Right.
And I just got an email from SAE saying like, "Hey, Zoom has upgraded so many features, and you can now just teach on Zoom." And I was still like, I don't think so.
Do you know what? I've had issues. The biggest issues I've had with Zoom are it's pretty friendly with Mac, but Windows it's not. So if you have Windows, you have to get some other softwares to use multiple audio devices like Zoom. Like if you use Zoom and you want to like use Pro Tools and share Pro Tools, Zoom shows up as an audio engine. Windows doesn't do that. So you have to do whatever through some other software to
like
get it to all talk.
Patch Bay or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I still haven't figured it out. Admittedly, I haven't put like enough time into it, but I did put some time into figuring it out and still got nothing.
Dude, what is it about Windows? Every time a student has Windows, I'm like, God damn, this is gonna be rough.
Yeah, they're like, do you know what the worst part is? When they go, "Oh, I just got this new Windows computer."
Why didn't anybody tell you to not?
You should have talked to me first, buddy. Yeah, that is. Oof.
Oh my God! One of my students the other day. This guy is awesome. He's like, super passionate, and like he's older, so he's worried and self-conscious that like he's too late in the game. So he's really trying to take the steps. And we were just talking about mixers, and he randomly asked me about the Behringer X32. And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's a good one. It's pretty cool." And then like the next class over the weekend, or the class after the weekend, he's like, "Hey, I bought it." I'm like, "Wait, why?" And he's like, You said it was fine." I'm like, "Yeah,
it's cool, but yeah, do you need that?"
Also, it's also mainly a live mixer. I don't know if you're doing that.
Right.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I get that all the time. I like when people, when they're starting out, they totally don't know what's going on, but they have some money, so they show up and they're like, "Hey, I got all this stuff," and it's like, well, wait a second. Like, I mean, I'm not saying that's bad, but like, you don't even know what that is, man.
Yeah.
I know, like, when I went to SAE, when I was going, they were part of tuition. I'm sure they still do something like this where they give away like software. Or it's the giveaway. They make you pay for software, and so they give you all these things. And I remember when they gave me an audio interface. They gave me the Apollo Twin, and I was like, I don't fucking know what this is. How am I going to even use it? And that was a good system because like they gave it to me and I'm like using it right now, years and years later. But like buying your own gear without knowing what you're talking about is like not a good move.
Yeah.
I appreciate the gung ho ness of it, but not a good move.
Dude, I mean, that's literally what he told me. He's like, I don't know what to do. He bought so many plugins and mixers, and I was like, I don't know what anything does. And he got to that like kind of chaos, like I'm frozen. I don't even know what to touch.
Right.
And I was like,
right.
That's
like one of those bigger pieces of advice that I would give people. Like if I could go back and redo everything, it's like don't buy shit until you know you need it, and then you know why you need it. That's the key. That's the key.
Yes.
Right? Like Like plugins is a really good example where like you go, people are like, oh, what plugins should I buy? What plugins? Like, what DAW are you using? I'm using Pro Tools. All right, learn the Pro Tools EQ. When you know Pro Tools' EQ is not doing what you want it to do, and you know you're doing it right, that's when you go buy another EQ. And then even then, there's so many levels of like these two things are good and basically do the same thing, but one might work for you and one might not.
Yeah.
So like that's like one of those big things where it's like don't buy shit until you know what you need, you know how to use it, and then also don't buy shit that you know you're gonna need to buy a new one.
Yeah.
Like if you know you're gonna upgrade it, then don't waste your money on it because it's just a waste of money.
Dude.
That's like one of the things I always tell people.
That's so true, man. So true. I remember like the first plugin I ever bought was a reverb because Deverb was just not cutting it for me.
Yes.
And that was like a year and a half into like the Pro Tools game. Like I didn't buy anything.
Right.
I was so convinced about like Pro Tools is the shit. Like, I knew it. And I thought I was shit, and it's because of me that my production sucked. And then eventually you learn like, wait, there's other shit out there.
Yeah, it was funny. There was like a couple of big conversations with like big dog dudes that I did. I don't remember the dude's name. He used to work at in one of the back rooms at Engine Room, but he was like Alicia Keys' producer.
Brandon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I remember when I was just a wee little intern in the middle of the night. He was just like coming out for coffee or whatever, and I was like, "Can I ask you one question? Like, what plugins do you need?" And he goes, I mix everything with Pro Tools stock and Sound Toys. And he's like, maybe I get one here and there, but that's it. He's like, I own a lot of other plugins because I get sessions from people and I just don't want to redo what they did. But that's all I really need. And that was one big one where I was like, huh. So like learn the shit you have. And then who was Bob Rock, big mixing engineer. He came in Engine Room one time and we were kind of like making sure that we, like before he came in, we're like, hey, what do you need? You need this, this, and this. And so we got what we could. And then when they came in, he asked for like a couple other ones. He's like, hey, do you guys have this? Do you guys have this? And I was like, no, but we could totally get it. And he goes, nah, don't worry about it. I'll just use something else. Like it wasn't like that big a deal. It was like, I can make the other stuff work. This is just a preference.
When did Bob Rock come in? Do you remember? This was after I left, right?
Yeah, I want to say it was like 2 years ago.
Yeah, dude.
I want to say it was 2 years ago.
Dude, like, so I'm a huge fucking Metallica fan.
Right.
And Bob Rock was the guy behind Metallica for a long time. So when I heard him... And you did that session, or was it Leonard? Is it you?
I did it.
Fuck yeah, dude. That's fucking badass.
Yeah, it was cool.
I'm so glad. I'm also jealous. But also I realized that... I also realized that if I was there, I would have been like, so what's Lars really like?
Yeah, right. It's funny because like I feel like I'm really good at that where I don't get starstruck and I can just kind of work.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's a couple of weak spots where like you kind of just want to be like, dude, yo, how's that homie? What is he like? Like, you want to do that, but you can't.
Right.
I have more often than not, the problem I have is when I'm with like industry professionals and I start geeking out. Like I don't care who they've worked with, I just want to like pick their brain. I'm like, what kind of compressors do you like? Attack release, you know?
Right.
That's the only one I had tried to like slow down on. But I think I'm pretty good at it.
It's a skill set, right? It's something
you
gotta.
Being professional is like totally a skill set, and it's harder to do in the music industry because being professional. Like if you're an accountant and you go to your office and you're like, oh, hello sir, how are you doing today, and you're good at your job and you talk like that and it's all cool and you wear a suit and that's your job. You can't do that at like if you're an engineer, because vibe is so a thing. So you have to know how to be professional and good at your job, but at the same time relaxed enough to make everybody else relaxed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Oh,
that's the key. That's the key.
Huge part of it.
Right? Because at the end of the day, you have to be somebody that everybody wants to spend 8 hours in a day in a room with. And that's so key.
Right.
That's one thing people don't think about.
Yeah. And that could mean different things for different artists. Like some people want you to just stay quiet.
That's tough too, right? Then there's the reed, because there is that sliding scale. Yeah, I would say like the way I usually handle it, even still to this day, it's like you start off, stay quiet, and then pick your places. Like when I was starting out, I wouldn't say shit. Like I wouldn't say shit. It was just like good. But now that I know what I'm talking about, now that I like when they're wrong and I know I'm right. Like there's those situations. That's when I like, if I don't stop them and say like, oh hey, that was a bad take. Yeah. Then they're gonna get a bad recording. And that's my fault, right? So I used to be super quiet and like not confident at all in my opinion, but now I'm at the point where it's like start off real quiet and then just kind of read it, but only talk when necessary.
Yeah.
Unless and then usually what ends up happening is they start asking. Right, because when they realize that I'm paying attention and like they agree with me, then they can relax and they don't have to worry about, did that take sound good? Right. Just do it good, trust, and that takes a lot off the artist too. Right?
Yeah, right. Totally. Right. I mean, you have to develop that trust, and that's why when artists develop that trust with an engineer, they usually stick with them. Right. For a while, right? Yeah. And that's, I think a lot of people eventually learn. I mean, there's no way for you to really learn that. I mean, you can hear it, but when you experience it, it makes total sense. Right. Like when they call you back or ask for you specifically, it's like, oh, yeah, I know why. Yeah. Right. What a crazy game. So, like, wait, when did you... Was SAE, like, your entrance into this whole thing?
Not... Well, kind of. So I started out as a DJ. Uh-huh. Which... is not a story you hear from a lot of audio engineers. Yeah. But I started in like 2012 as a DJ. I started doing it as a hobby. And then eventually I was like, man, this is an expensive hobby. Let me try to get a couple little gigs to, pay for the gear I'm getting. And then I was like, shit, well, now I need to get more gigs to get the gear to do the gigs. Yeah. And then it kind of just started piling up. And I was like, oh, shit, am I doing this professionally now? And so I was doing that for a couple years. And then I was like, fuck it, I can just start making music. So I picked up Ableton and just kind of tried to self-teach, and I did that for a couple years. And I was like, I would like this music to sound good. Mm-hmm. And that was when I went to SAE. And I thought I was just going in for like, this is how you produce music, and you'll be able to make dance hits after this. And I learned about all this other stuff, the recording and the mixing, mastering. I didn't even know those were things before. Right. When was that? And I liked all that stuff. I think I went in 2016.
So 4 years you were kind of just trying to do it yourself. Yeah.
I would say it was 2 years of DJing straight up, doing no other audio stuff, and then like 2 years of trying to do production.
Well, what got you into DJing then?
Well, so I was in the Navy, right? Mm-hmm. And I got out in 2012. And when I got out, they were paying for school for me. Nice. And so when I was doing that, I was like, okay, You know, they're paying for school. I don't really have to stress. I'm gonna do something I like doing, and I was doing that. And at the same time, I was double majoring for a little while, but I was like doing physics. I started out physics and nursing, then I did physics, nursing, and music. Nice. And I dropped the nursing, and then eventually just dropped the physics. But it started out where it was like I need a cool hobby that I like doing, and I was going to a lot of shows at the time. That was when I was really getting into the scene, and I was like, I could fucking do that. And yeah, like for the first time in my life, that was when I was like, I could do this. Actually, even before that, I had maybe when I was a teenager, I had gotten a keyboard for Christmas and just kind of I wanted to learn how to play piano, but I never like got lessons and just poorly taught myself how to play the piano for years and years. You know, after like 5 or 6 years of teaching myself the piano, I knew like one song and didn't know how. Like I didn't know how I knew how to play it. I just knew that these were the buttons to push. You know. But so I was like, okay, I'm not a musical person, and I realized I wanted to get into music. And at first, I was actually going to go to school for music management. Mm-hmm. I was like, I'm good at talking to people. That'll get me into the music field.
Right.
And I just realized that was not for me. Mm-hmm. And I was like, fuck it, I'll just do it as a hobby, and then spiraled upward from there.
But then how did you learn music? Just yourself?
What aspect?
Like did you take classes in theory or like?
So I took one piano class. Mm-hmm. It was at 8:00 in the morning, so my attendance was not great, not great. And also we had this teacher. I shit you not. She was like this little tiny old kind of mean lady, and I remember, I think I had learned, I don't even remember what song it was Heart and Soul or something like that. You know, like some like old rock song, like, you know, like 50s rock, and she goes, "Oh, that's the devil's music." And I was like, "Oh shit, I don't know if this is the class for me," you know. So I eventually dropped that class and then kind of just weekly taught myself music theory. What I did was, in order to effectively make music, what I did was I learned that there was major keys and minor keys. Mm-hmm. And then I learned how to derive major scales. Uh-huh. And I still do this to this day. Before I start a song, I say, okay, what key am I going to work with? If I don't know the key, then if I don't know the scale, then I'll look it up, and then I'll just kind of practice it as I'm making it, and then huzzah!
Oh, that's interesting. How do you like? How do you say this? How do you like determine flow? Like, because you have to chord progression, right? How do you determine like where to go, how to go to the next set? Like, how do you resolve? You know what I'm talking about? Like,
luck or trial and error. It's a lot of trial and error. I don't like. I've been told that a couple of times by people who like are, you know, music theory people who play piano well, and they're like, "Why did you do that?" And I'm like, "Because either that was what I could do, or that's what I thought. Like I'm just playing by ear. Like I don't really. If it sounds good, it sounds good. If it doesn't, then I just don't do that."
Right.
You know? So I've specifically not learned like chord modes, right? What is that, right? With the progressions. The VI, I didn't learn those kind of progressions on purpose because I've been told more than a few times that my progressions are interesting, and I know it's because I don't know what I'm talking about, and I don't want to get locked into that. Okay, this, you know.
Yeah. That's so fascinating because like a lot of students, and this is something I couldn't really figure out for a while. I did learn some music theory. I've forgotten a lot of it. But, you know, a lot of my students will tell me, like, man, I wish I had learned theory because I just don't know where to go. But then I talk to some people, and even myself, I find this. It's like sometimes that shit just gets in the way of, like,
right.
You got to let the emotion and creativity guide it.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of at the point where I can go and, like, now I can go and learn that because I have that built-in workflow of knowing how to not know what I'm doing.
Right.
But at the same time, when you know music theory, when you know the right progressions, that's a song. Boom.
Right.
That's a song. Like, you don't have to think about it to make it a song. It might not be the most interesting, but you will have a good sounding musically song.
Right. It's just another tool to like. Yeah. There's always a give and take. Like I sometimes get so frustrated. Like, God, if I knew theory, I would know how to resolve from here to here. Like, I would. That's the frustrating part. But then I have a friend who's like a jazz major.
Right.
Who says like, man, I wish I could just kind of let go of all this and just focus on the emotion.
So but he might just be wrong.
Yeah.
he might just be wrong. So that's the beauty of MIDI, right?
Yes.
Because so you can record these emotional things, and then when you fuck up, you can go in there and find the right note, and then you kind of know for next time, like, okay, I know why that fucked up.
Right.
If you pay attention, or if you choose to pay attention.
Yeah. But speaking of chords, what do you think of? I didn't even think we were going to talk about this, but the unison chord pack. What is it called? Have you heard of that thing?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So basically, this guy.
It's just like MIDI chords.
They're MIDI packs, and it's a MIDI pack full of chord progressions. Basically, it's full of all the chords you can think of, plus multiple chord progressions, kind of categorized by pop, genres and jazz and whatever. And you just basically drag and drop and assign it an instrument. Have you? I mean, what do you think?
I haven't used that particular one, but I am familiar with that concept.
Yeah.
So here's the thing with those, and I kind of, so the first time I ran into that, I was always very hardcore, even since I started making music, where I was like, I'm not using other people's MIDI to make my music, because that's other people's music.
Mm-hmm.
So then, I don't know, a couple years back maybe, I had purchased, it was a preset pack for Serum, I think, and then it came with MIDI chord progressions. And so the reason I bought the preset pack was not even to use those presets, but to kind of backwards engineer them so I could learn how to make these kind of sounds. And then I was like, maybe I should just take a look at this MIDI and maybe I could kind of do the same thing. And I realized that, firstly, just if you're going note-wise, they were doing things that I was not doing, that I was not even I wasn't gonna ever do. They were just things I wasn't considering. And so even though I wasn't necessarily using that MIDI, knowing what it was supposed to look like, huge, right? Because, again, the kind of the backwards reverse engineering kind of thing. So being able to tear that apart and say, oh, so it's that extra bass note that I'm missing, or they're not just keeping that bass line straight with the bottom note of the chord or whatever kind of thing was happening. But then on top of that, and I don't know about how that one works, when you get MIDI with presets, a lot of the times what I see is that the MIDI is like made for one of the presets. And what you'll see is that there's other stuff attached to that MIDI, right? So MIDI clips can have automation on them, right? You have, other than your note data, you have modulation and velocity and channel pressure. And then I was noticing that all of that was attached to these MIDI clips too. And there was stuff that I was just not doing, riding the mod wheel, or, whatever the case be. All stuff that I was not doing and I didn't realize was so crucial to making a sound.
Interesting.
So it was, even still to this day, I'll kind of do that where, especially if you're in kind of not pop, if you're not doing straightforward pop, there's musical kind of trends.
Yeah.
That are kind of more unique to certain genres.
Sure.
So just being able to say, oh, this is what a hip hop progression looks like, or that's the chord in a hip hop progression versus, oh, that's trance, versus, oh, that's even the subgenres of dance where it's like, that's trance, that's house, that's future house. Seeing those differences, I mean, super up to my game.
That's fascinating. It's like, it wasn't really the chord progression, but the analysis of the the chord progression.
Yes,
That was the key.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And you know, it's like just like anytime you see somebody else working, that's exactly what it is.
Right.
It's a way to see somebody else work, and that makes such a huge difference.
Like you're seeing their thought process from A to B.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Right.
The same thing tends to happen when like when I start listening to demos of records that are out there. It's like, oh shit, okay.
How'd they start?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, you changed that part. Oh, the lyrics were that. I wonder why you changed it. And then you kind of put the dots together.
Yeah, I feel like you don't get that as much as you used to. Yeah. I remember there was I think it was like Panic at the Disco's first album, where that was back in the days of like Kazaa. When you were downloading music.
Oh my god!
Just randomly, yes. Right? Yeah, you remember that?
Holy
yeah, there
shit!
It is.
What a throwback!
And LimeWire. LimeWire was another one, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember before that album had come out, I was a big Panic at the Disco fan. Before that album came out, I was kind of individually downloading their songs, and then when the album came out, I bought the album, and there was 2 or 3 songs on it that were different versions. And I was like, "Whoa, what the fuck's going on here? I don't know that song." Yeah. And then being able to, I listened to that kind of recently, where it was like, oh, I could see that in this original version or whatever you want to call it, all the drums were programmed. You could tell it was kind of like a scratch. Like, hey, it was probably the demo they sent to A&R or whatever, and then A&R was like, hey, use your fucking drummer. Play the drums on it, and they did, and that was the album cut.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but you don't get to see that. You don't see that. Rarely see that anymore.
I think you see it to a certain degree because like people post so much of the making of.
That's true.
On their IG, so it's not the demos now. It's more of like the I don't know
process.
What you call it. Yeah, the process, the story behind it, or whatever, or whatever the IG world.
Right. Yeah.
That's
I think that's so I would say that was like a skill that I had to develop, was knowing what something is going to sound like when it's done. Mm-hmm. Because like when you're making a song, like if before you get into music, you've never heard anything other than like a mastered song or a live song, so it's at least well mixed and it's mastered. And then when you go to make music, it doesn't sound like that. You're like, oh well, this doesn't sound like that, I must have no idea what's going on. And the reality is, like, you have to know, like, okay, there's those different stages of music making. There's the production and recording, then there's the mixing, and then there's the mastering. So it shouldn't sound like it's mixed until it's mixed. It shouldn't sound like it's mastered until it's mastered. And that was a skill that I had to develop. And then, like, once I finally got that idea, I was able to, like, make better music.
Yeah.
That's like one thing I recommend to people whenever they're kind of starting out music. And so this is another thing that I'm really glad that I got into audio engineering from the dance and DJ side of things, because very early on I was like entering remix contests. Mm-hmm. So when you enter a remix contest, what they do is they'll give you the stems of a song. Mm-hmm. Typically unmixed stems. And so I was just downloading remix packages, not even remixing them, just to kind of, again, see how people are setting up their sessions and to hear what an unfinished track sounds like. And it was one of those things that, like, really it built up my confidence as a producer, but probably hurt my confidence a little bit as a mix engineer.
Why is that?
Well, because I was like, oh, okay, so I did try to mix it, and it doesn't sound like the radio version. But once you get the hang of it, you kind of get it, you know.
Yeah, totally. Holy shit, that's funny. Wow. So you get into SAE, you start learning about the production side of things. That was 2016.
I think when I first met you at Engine Room,
you were at SAE.
When I just got out of SAE.
Oh, right, because it's a year. Right.
I had just gotten, I was on the quick course, too. I think I graduated January 2017.
Nice.
And then I started working at Engine Room a week later.
Wait, so how did you know Bader?
We went to high school together.
Oh, right.
It was really funny because I hadn't seen Bader in a while. It was probably like a month or two, maybe a month before I got out of SAE. And I just happened to see him at like a friend's barbecue. We were just kind of like hanging out, having a couple of drinks, and we were like catching up. And I was like, "Hey, what are you fucking doing now?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I do music." I was like, "I do music now," And he's like, "Oh, okay. So are you like in music?" I was like, "I'm at SAE." He's like, "I went to SAE," and then we kind of did that whole thing. He's like, "Dude, come to Engine Room. You should do that." And I'm so glad he did because. No fucking way was I gonna do it. Like in my head, I was like, all right, I'm gonna be a music producer. I'm a DJ. I have to make music, and fuck that studio stuff.
Right.
But he's like, dude, trust me, just come on over. I really had nothing else going on at the time, so I was like, yeah, fuck it, let me go. Best decision I ever made.
Going to a studio, you mean?
Yeah, for sure. Because at the time, I didn't realize how intertwined the music making process is. Mm-hmm. Becoming a better recording engineer made my music better. Becoming a better mix engineer made my production better. If you learn about mastering, your mixing gets better. You learn about recording, your mixing gets better. And all these things overlap each other so much. And that is something I would never have realized. Mm-hmm. And then also the collaborative portion of it, seeing how other people work and working and having other people like, hey, we should work on stuff together, even if it never leaves that room.
Right.
That collaborative, and like I said, I'd been essentially doing music by myself in a bubble. Like I had no music friends, right? So I was totally like by myself in a bubble for like 4 years. And so like I didn't even know how to work with other people. I'd be like, yeah, just shut up, let me do this, I still do that sometimes, but I'm like better at not doing that. But yeah, all of that stuff, working in a studio, learning about the process, learning about how other people do their stuff, and another big thing too is when you're making your own music, when you're producing your own music, you do every step of this process. And so sometimes all of the stages suffer because you're doing all of them. And then, working professionally at a studio, I'm just the recording engineer, or I'm just the mixing engineer, or I'm just the mastering engineer. Right. And I realized, I'm not a bad mix engineer. Mm-hmm. I work on other people's records and they sound great. Right. And then I work on mine and it's like, hey, why doesn't it sound like that when I, it's not as good when I do it for other people, And so like learning that, splitting those stages up, and that I can do all of those things, huge help. Man. So thanks for the job, buddy.
Was it me?
Yeah. Oh, I still hold a grudge against you because, all right, so I was living in Central Jersey, and I was going into Manhattan to go to Engine Room. I had set up an interview to meet you. I had taken the 2.5-hour train ride to get into Manhattan. I waited Engine Room for an hour. Guess who doesn't show up? The almighty Jeet can't make it.
Wait, when was this? Where was I?
So I found out later, intimately, that you were hung up at one of the office spaces.
Oh, God damn it.
Yep. And then I remember getting hung up doing the same job you did, getting hung up like a year or two later and going, that's why.
I get it now.
I get it. I'm not that mad anymore. Yeah.
Holy shit.
And you did it twice, by the way. I just want to point out you did it twice.
I did.
Yeah. But then the third time I came in, it was funny because you weren't even like ready for an interview because you still had other stuff going on. But I think Chris Griffin was doing a drum
Yes.
mixing tutorial.
You were there. I remember this.
And you're like, all right, cool. Just help set up and stuff. And, you know, we did that. And I just ended up hanging out all day with that. And then we were like walking downstairs and you're like, oh, yeah, you got the job.
But did I interview you at all?
I don't even know, man. I think we were just talking and I was just kind of like handing you stuff as you were doing things.
Holy shit. Because in my head, this is so funny that this is all coming back.
Oh, let me hear your perspective.
My perspective was the first time my first memory of you is Chris Griffin drum tracking.
Yeah.
I don't remember. Yeah.
Because you didn't show up the other 2 times. Yeah.
And
that makes sense.
I remember Bader vouching for you a lot. And I can't remember. Oh, fuck. I can't remember if you like brought it up when I missed the first 2, but I do remember him vouching for you a lot, and you had the job. So like when somebody like Bader vouches for a person, it's like I don't even put it as a thought. It's like, okay, that guy's got it. All right, so I don't have to. Yeah. So I kind of like let it out of my head, and then when I eventually saw you, that's probably why I was like, yeah. You got it. But like, holy shit, dude. But well, here's a good question then. You never wanted to get into the studio space.
Right.
So then why the fuck would you travel twice and then come a third time? Like, what made you even, like, the first time, why didn't you just say, what? Fuck this. I mean, this is exactly what I thought it was going to be. Fuck that shit.
I think probably, probably Bader talking me into it. B, not much better going on, but then C, like knowing that it was important. Like I knew that I barely had a grasp on the music industry, and I knew that if I just fucking went back in my basement and did my own thing, that I might get stuck. So I knew that being in the industry, I think I was talking to my dad about it, where I was like, hey, do I fucking do this or not? He's like, dude, you know, a foot in the door is a foot, you know, that's a foot further than you had, kind of thing. Wow. And so yeah, you almost pushed me out, but here we are today. So thank you. Yeah.
I was testing you the whole time.
Oh yeah.
Make sure you really.
I was in the other room the whole time.
Like, let me see if this
you passed the test.
Dude, I think the same thing happened to Rohan. He told me that. Like years later. He told me, he's like, dude, I reached out to you so many times because I wanted the internship, and like you kept blowing me off, and I can be like that. I know, I get it. And then I remember
especially
one
in that
day,
job.
Especially in that, which I do want to talk about. But I just remember one day, like he kind of cornered me by the elevator.
Hey guy. Buddy.
It's like, hey buddy. So
and you're like, this guy must be important. He's got a fedora.
No, honestly, it was one of those things where it's like I knew I was going to give it to him. Right. I just never made it.
Oh yeah, he was in the program too, so you were familiar with him.
He was in the program. Right. I was a fan of his band in India. Right. So it's like what, and like we were already getting along. You know, we'd already started. So it's like it just made sense. And when things like when you have like 20,000 things and one thing makes sense, you just don't think about it. And that was to my fault, but at the same time, I remember him saying years later, he's like, dude, you like blew me off so many times. I thought you just didn't want me. And he got an offer from a different place as well and still chose Engine Room. I was testing all of you. Yeah.
Oh man, could you imagine could you imagine if Rohan got a job at a different studio? How fewer hangovers I'd have to this day? My hangover count would have went way out the floor.
You and him, the universe just like it just explodes when you.
The Dreamless team, we used to call
You guys are quite the pairing. It's like whenever you guys are hanging out, that is like my cue to exit.
I've seen. I always see that look in your eyes when you go, all right, guys, I gotta call it. And you usually get out early enough too, which is smart.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. The one I remember the most, I guess, was like when me and Shailene came, and then Rohan was there. We were doing a bunch of recordings, and you came, and then like Shailene, such a sweet kid, right?
Yeah.
But he's like, yeah, I'm just gonna hang out and vibe out with these guys, and then I'm like. I saw Rohan, and Rohan's like, no, dude, I'm not drinking tonight. I'm not doing it. I'm like, all right, I'll see you at home. See you. I know where this goes. I've seen this so much. It's like, I don't need... You guys are just amazing together. And like when we shot that video, you were right there on the couch. Oh my God. It was one of the funnest nights of my life.
That was a good time, yeah.
Holy
that was a good time.
Shit.
And you bailed out early. So that was...
that was probably the night. It's like I knew that this was only the beginning of the night.
Right.
It's like, all right, I'm out.
Yeah.
You guys are fantastic together. Holy
Thanks, man. Yeah.
shit, man. But like, yeah, you were an intern. Did you ever become a GA? No, you were a mastering assistant.
Yeah, but that was a brief stint, but yeah, did do that.
And then when did you take the job? Probably 2018, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
like a little bit, like leading up to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say I'd been there for like a year at the time.
That sounds about right. I think the tail of I want to say end of summer 2017. I told Mark like, I'm pretty done. I don't think I have anything to offer. Blah 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 blah.
Right.
And that was when me and him. No, of course. Mark's question was like, so is this going to be like a 2-week thing, or are we just going to figure it out? I'm like, we'll figure it out. And then obviously that goes on for months.
It was like months, right? Yeah.
Which is fine. And then like eventually I told him like, hey, this is like at the end of this year, I think I'm going to call it. So yeah, I remember the tail end of that year. That was when we started talking about either you or Rohan becoming the operations manager. I remember. And
Leonard was in the mix too.
Oh yeah, Leonard. But I knew Leonard wasn't gonna take it. That
chance.
was not his thing.
Right.
And thank God he didn't take it.
Yeah. For everybody. Yeah.
Can you imagine him up in those events?
I literally can't. I physically can't. I can't even imagine him climb. He can't climb that ladder because he's scared of heights.
Yep.
He's scared of heights.
I remember.
I was in the vent, and mind you, this vent's what, 10, 15 feet off the floor, right? 15 probably.
Yeah.
Right. And I was up there. I was like kind of hanging out, and I had left a screwdriver on the floor, and Len was down there. I was like, Len, can you hand me that screwdriver? And he picks it up without even stepping on the ladder. He goes like this, and reaches up. I go, buddy, I can't get that, man. And he steps on the first foot of the ladder, but he doesn't take his other foot off the ground. He reaches up again. I go, all right, I'll come down. Yeah, I'll never forget that.
Oh my God, the one time I asked him to climb up the ladder, he did come like about halfway. I don't know what. I think I might have. I don't remember how I said it. Maybe I was just pissed because I was up in the vent all day or whatever. And I just needed to siphon some water. It was like ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I was like, dude, you just got to just fucking come up halfway. It's like, G, anything for you, G. It was so sweet because he was shaking the whole
right?
time.
Shaking? Yeah. And you can see the look on his face where he's like, he's not kidding. Like, he's legitimately scared being that high off the ground. Yeah, you can see it.
Oh my God, I feel...
I don't want to laugh at his fear, but it was fucking funny.
No, it was hilarious.
Yeah.
It was hilarious, and I was so, like, cold and emotionless when I asked him to climb up those ladders. I only see it now. Like, in the moment, it's like, dude, I'm in so much pain. I'm aching. I'm itching.
Right.
I just want to do this.
Yeah.
Oh, man, dude. So when you took the job, it was, like... what was your first, like, dabbling in the job? Because I think in the months leading up, you definitely started to, like, pitch in on certain things, especially when it came to fixing shit up, which I was fucking terrible at.
Right, so my dad was always kind of, like, in that handyman kind of business. You know, a contractor and maintenance, and I mean he's, you know, does maintenance even still. So I was always kind of, and he always showed me how to do things, and so I was always pretty hands on. I guess I'd probably had a lot more music gear experience than a lot of people, because I had my own DJ setup, which you know, had that whole thing going. But then when I was on shift as an intern, so the way that those intern shifts work, you're pretty much just sitting in the front office until somebody needs you to do something, and you're picking up the phone, and I just fucking hated picking up that phone. I hated doing it because there was always some drama when you pick up the phone. It wasn't about it. So we had the broken bin in the shop. Yeah. So I was like, okay, let me. And I was on shift with Leonard. Leonard was my shift partner, like the whole time I was an intern. And Leonard didn't love picking up the phone. He didn't want to go anywhere. So I was like, all right, dude, you sit in here, you take the phone. I'm gonna go do shit in the shop. If you need me, let me know. And he'd be like, okay, you know. And he was all good with that. So that's what I did. I would just start trying to fix shit in the shop. And admittedly, while I knew how to like work these tools, I didn't necessarily know what I was doing. Right. And so, you know, I would fuck up stuff, but then eventually I was kind of getting the hang of it, and I was actually fixing stuff. And then that was kind of how I got on the radar. And then I was doing just other general contracting maintenance work for Mark, you know, non-audio related stuff, painting walls and things like that. Right. So I guess that kind of put me on that radar. Yeah. And that kind of led to, I guess that was one of the things that, because you had the technical skill set when it came to that stuff. That was what was going for you. And Rohan had like the businessy manager style that so it was really between the two of you. And I can't remember why we can't. I don't even know if because business manager stuff doesn't save you money. But being able to fix stuff does. I think that's probably why it went that way. I have no idea. I don't even think I played a decision in that. I think I told Scott that I think Rohan's the guy, and obviously I was like just looking out. I just wanted him to get paid, really. But Rohan might even have bowed out. I think he did. I think he did. Yeah. I think he started to realize, he might have had this conversation with you personally. It's like he started to realize, like, you know what? I think I'm better off doing other shit. Right. But that eventually ended up with you, like, and I think that was how it started, right? Like, you just started fixing stuff around the place. You started understanding what it was like to manage. I was very proactive. That was kind of the thing, and I always tell people that as an intern, like, and I don't think people understand what I'm talking about. It's like, be proactive, you know. If there's stuff to do it and do it well, and then, you know, don't bitch about it, at least in front of other people. Go bitch about it on your own. And I was very eager to get sessions, you know. So I wasn't there for very long before I was like, okay, how do I get sessions, you know? And so I guess I got put on the radar pretty quick between doing sessions and fixing stuff. Yeah. And so I think that's kind of. Were you teaching as an intern? Do you remember? I was. I was an intern and I was teaching. That was another thing too. I remember actually, like, no one would ever came up to me and was like, hey, you're moving up from the intern world. You're not an intern anymore. I remember going into Mark's office and be like, I'd been teaching students for like 3 months or something like that. And I'd been doing paid sessions. And I was like, I don't think I should be an intern anymore. He goes, oh yeah, no. And then that was it. And I just wasn't an intern anymore. But yeah. And then you officially got the job, Taco 2018? Something like that. I really don't remember. That's when I left. I left at the end of 2017. There was it's very nice of Mark to throw a little what is it called? Farewell party. Farewell party, right? Yeah. Getting goodbye party. Yes, they have those. Getting goodbye party. Yes.
It's
Is that what they call it in India? Yeah, that's Getting very goodbye, buddy. Yes,
it's a very good goodbye. And that too, I dipped out early on that one too. I'm just not that guy.
I do remember that
guy, bro. Just not that guy. But then right afterwards, I guess you got the job, and like, so what was it like? Because I was away the whole time, or at least for the first part of that.
It's funny you said that, because you left right away. I think you had left like the day after you stopped working. You might have had like 1 or 2 days to pack or something like that.
You're right. I literally did my last day and then left 2 days later or something.
Right. I remember you saying, I have to pack, so I can't work today. Yeah, I remember you saying that.
Yeah.
So the adjustment was a little rough, because I think I only shadowed you for a week and a half, maybe.
Right.
And I remember Mark always being like, yeah, if you have any problems, just call Jeet. And I'm like, dude, no, he's in India. There's like a 12-hour time difference, guy. I can't just be calling him if I'm having little problems. So I would like often I would just try to figure shit out myself, which I do anyway.
Right.
So the learning curve was a little rough. The first thing I did, and not that it's your fault, but I kind of was like making workflows of the place make more sense to me. Like, well, how does this internship work? Like, I had to put like my own kind of systems in place.
For sure.
Right.
For sure.
So once I got through that, it was, I'll tell you, I really leaned heavily on the GAs. I leaned on them so hard. So like Rohan, I remember having a conversation with him. Like you said before, he was more of the business guy, and I was like, yeah, Rohan, I need you to be the dog on these interns, if they fuck up, you get on their asses. And he was like, cool. He was really good at it too. He was really good at it. So I leaned on him a lot for that. Len too. Len was a GA at the time, and I think Darley. I think Darley was there at first. Right, and Darley had been a GA for a long time, so I was leaning on him like, what the fuck am I supposed to do, dude? Or like, how much stuff do I tell you to do versus what do I do? And I started just kind of figuring that out, because like we said, the technical stuff, cool, I could do that. The management stuff is, not super
natural.
Yeah. I mean, I like I said, I was in the military, and I had a little bit of rank, so like I had taken classes on how to lead people, but leading people in the military and leading people in the civilian world, especially when they're unpaid interns.
Yeah.
Like, it was so hard for me to be hard on them, because it's like, I did that where it was, I travel 2.5 hours, do a fucking 15-hour shift, and then 2.5 hours home, or sleep on the couch for my next shift or whatever it was.
Right.
So that was something it took me a while to figure out.
Yeah. But yeah, dude, already 2 things that you just mentioned were like 2 big mistakes that I had made, or at least I had made, and I don't know if I fully figured them out. One was not leaning on the GAs for some reason for a long time, and like, fuck, I did that job for a while, right? Yeah. It's like I, for some reason, thought I had to do everything.
Because that's not management mentality. That's worker mentality. Right.
I'm a worker. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Your job is to tell people what to do. And you don't, and then at the same time, I started going down that road too, where because if things don't get done, it then falls on you. So you go, well, if nobody's doing it, I'm going to do it.
Right.
And then that becomes a slope where you just stop telling people to do things because they don't get done.
Yeah.
So I get that.
I totally fell down that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I ever got out of that until I actually left and got some perspective on things. And then the other big mistake was, so the guy who originally set up basically all the what's the word? The foundation for the backups, camera systems, internships, all those things. Yeah. The guy who set it up was actually, I want to say, I think it was 2 operations managers before me.
Right.
And he had left. Like, I was an intern.
Benoit and then Nicor.
Benoit. Right. And for some reason, I was hesitant to change that and make it work for my flow, which I totally should have done.
Yeah.
I think I was so worried that, like, well, it works fine.
If I fuck it up, right,
it might be worse. It's like, oh my God, I don't want that. But yeah, you have to.
And that happens too. That does happen.
Yeah.
But then, you learn about it. Yeah, and that's, I mean, that applies to fucking anything. Mm-hmm. Use a system that makes sense to you, that works for you, and then realize that that system has to be updated.
Yeah.
Right? Everything gets updated. Because even if, when the first dude put that in place, even if that was the best way to do things, especially when you're talking technology and like backups and stuff, 3 years later, especially when you're talking between like 2012 versus 2018, 15, right? Whatever. That's a huge jump. That's a huge jump. So yeah, you kind of you have to be on top of it. For sure.
Leaning on the GA has definitely helped. So you were focusing more on like the technical shit.
Well, so what it boiled down to was kind of 2 things. It was like, I know what has to get done. You have a list of shit that has to get done. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to delegate this stuff out to whoever I think can get it done. But then at the same time, there are some things that other people just, we didn't have other people that could solder as well.
Right.
Right. It wasn't for a while. It wasn't probably till like halfway through my time as operations manager till I had somebody else, Frank, who I could lean on and say, hey, we need to fix this stuff, which, would free me up to do other things.
Right.
So that was kind of how that went down. It was just kind of like, you have to delegate as much as you can, but at the same time, if no one else can do it, you have to.
Right.
And then all at the same time, I know in my head I don't want to be a manager. I don't want to be the operations manager. I don't want this job forever. I'm trying to get sessions.
Right.
So all the while I'm doing this, full-time job and taking sessions whenever I can.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to improve my craft and teaching. Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, I was putting in a lot of hours. When I was operations manager, I think I slept at the studio 3 nights a week.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you didn't have to go back all the way to...
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that was a brutal trip.
Man.
But you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes, and now I don't have to do that. And I'm better for it. I know my limits of not... I know my limits of exhaustion.
Right.
I know how hard I can push myself. I know when I should be saying yes to that extra session or saying no to that session.
Yeah.
Because I've done that too, where I've said yes to a session and been fucking smoked and just not did as good a job as I should have done.
Yeah. Wait, do you recall like a bad one?
A bad one? Well,
like where you knew you were pretty burnt
by
the time it started.
There was a couple. There was one that was a little bigger. There was one that was a little bigger where it was kind of like a band, not like a rock band. Like we had drums, but we had like horns and all sorts of things. And so I started doing that. I think it was like right after my shift. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of like setting this up. And so most sessions that I do there, I'm the guy who sets things up or picks the setup. I pick out my own microphones and so on and so forth, and I rarely ever have to deal with anybody else when it comes to that. In this particular session, they had a producer, they had a guy come in, and so I had the drums mic'd up, and the guy comes in and he's like, okay, so I'm just gonna have my engineer check this for you, and he pulls out his phone and the guy's on FaceTime, and he went to every microphone on the drums, like, good. And now, and like when you know what you're talking about, that gets a little offensive, so I'm already a little offended. But I was tired, so now I'm getting frustrated.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of just I'm a little, mush headed at the moment, and I'm kind of just running around putting mics on stands. And I think, do you know what it was? It was the Royer. The Royer 121. So you know how it's a side address mic, right? Mm-hmm. I had put it on the stand, and I had just kind of put it like this. And the guy comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, the fuck, what are you doing? That's not how that's microphone." I was just like, "Oh, yeah." And I kind of blew him off and kind of ran around and kept doing the things that I was doing. And they ended up not liking me at all. And everything came out. Everything came out fine. Oh, and then another thing that happened in that session, we were using the Coles ribbon microphone on the horns, and I had them. I want to say I had them about 1.5 feet, 2 feet off, and those Coles are they're fragile. Yeah. And he goes, "Move them closer." I was like, I don't know, dude. I've never tested the limits of these ribbon mics, and I don't want to. He's like, "Move it closer." I was like, "Listen, it's a very fragile mic. It's an old mic. There's a chance that we could break it if we." And we're talking, trumpets and shit, which put out a lot of air. Yeah. And he wanted to go up here, and I'm kind of like not happy about it. And he, so there was just a lot of tension in the room. Nothing went well, but everything came out good. All the recordings were good. But yeah, they ended up talking to Mark the next day, and they were like, and Mark was like, "Do you know how to use a Royer?" And I was like, "Yeah, dude, I was just running around putting stuff on stands." And he's like, "And you know about ribbon microphones in general?" I was like, yes, I know."
Oh no.
Yeah, and so that was the first. That was probably the only time anybody ever talked to Mark about me as far as recording.
Yeah.
So yeah,
fucking hell.
Don't do shit tired.
Yeah. No. But what you said about now you've learned when to say yes to things, because you don't want to do things just to do things. You want to do things so that you can do them well and put yourself forward. Right. It's because
if you have to be thinking not even just hey, I need to move forward, which obviously you want to be thinking about that, but you have to put a line at I definitely cannot move back. If there's a chance I'm gonna fuck this up, that one fuck up is way worse than 100
one win.
100. Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you how many people, good recording engineers that I saw, get blacklisted or not get sessions or even get fired because something went wrong during their session, or during a podcast or whatever, when it stops recording mid-session and they don't catch it, and then the client didn't get their files or whatever. And so if you, and that's another point on that. I never did podcast there, which was the number one way to get session. I would not do podcasts because they were so prone to getting fucked up. Because it's a whatever it was 2-hour recording and you can't be in the room.
That's the killer,
right? I can't even. How am I going to monitor this, right? And so I would not take those sessions, even though it was money. I couldn't take them because it was high risk, low reward.
That's so, dude. Not being in the room is a huge killer.
How are you going to do that?
You can still hear audio, and it might not even be recorded.
Right. I'm actually a little afraid because I have you on full screen that I can't see this recording right now. Yeah.
Oh, I've been swiping and just making.
I should be swiping. Okay, I think we're good. Okay, we're good. Okay. I'm gonna make your picture little.
This is your first podcast.
Yeah. So okay. This is why I don't do these. This is why I don't do these.
It's natural. No, I totally get it. Yeah, that was I remember that being a huge killer, and how many times have people fucked that up because they couldn't be in the room? It's inevitable.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's not even necessarily your fault.
Yeah.
Where there's weird, because you're working in, especially at a bigger studio like Edgewood, we have several rooms. You have four or five different rooms that you're potentially working in. Yeah. The settings on the computer just might be a little bit different. Yeah. And when Pro Tools says quit on this computer, it might not say quit on the other computer. So you might be used to one thing, not used to the other. I actually stopped taking sessions in Dubway. I still don't do sessions in Dubway. I haven't taken a paid session in Dubway. I've taken maybe one in the past two or so years.
Because
those rooms are a little less predictable.
Really? Is it the rooms, or is it the drives? Our half of the drive on the room. Because I can't even remember.
So the thing with those rooms is they're getting used by a lot more people, right? So inevitably, and then there's 2 separate drives on the computer. So inevitably, there's gonna be shit that's just There's stuff that's supposed to just work.
Yeah.
You know, I shouldn't have to go through a list of shit that's supposed to just work just to make it work.
Right.
So that's one thing. And then, you know, our communication with their side wasn't necessarily the best. So sometimes stuff wouldn't be working and they knew it, but we wouldn't know it. And then, so like, and then the big thing for that, so that, you know how they have those 3 rooms that are connected together by their control room or their shop or whatever. So like if you're troubleshooting an issue, you have to like leave the room, run down the hall, check something, run back, see if it worked. If it doesn't work,
sketchy
you're running. I was fucking like running man down that fucking hallway more times than I could count.
Yeah, and it looks sketchy to the client.
Right. I'll be right back. You know, you can't keep doing that, right? You can't keep doing that. Especially, and then those rooms are like so small too, where like when you're running in and out, it gets more hectic, you know? So I totally stopped doing sessions down there.
I've been totally trying to avoid doing anything in Dubway. I mean, I've done so much in Dubway. I mean, mainly because of convenience, but like, I've tried to avoid it so hard. But my reasoning is more for I just don't like them.
You know, that's funny too, because after you left, so Nicole, who was the manager over there, I would kind of like sit down and talk to her and be like, okay, I could see there's animosity here, but we're cool, right? So like we would kind of like go out and have drinks with them, you know, after work on a couple of days, just to kind of hey, you know, what can we do to kind of make things better? Because a lot of the problems we had, they would be like little problems that would go to the top of the chain of command right away. Right. So it's like, hey, you know, if somebody doesn't take the trash out, you don't need to fucking call the owner and tell them that somebody fucked up. We could handle that on a much lower level, and then the tension doesn't build up as much. And so we were doing that for a while, and it was kind of working.
That's awesome.
But one thing that's really hard about working in a studio environment like that, especially as management, is the churn of the interns. You know, like the people who are interns, you know, change completely every 6 months. Yeah. So it's you know, hard to reteach this same kind of mentality to everybody, and then to find those people that you can rely on to handle these problems and stuff like that. But, you know, that's the world you got to live with.
So true. Fuck, a lot of memories.
Yeah.
So wait, when did you leave the operations gig?
I didn't even think I did it for a year. I want to say, if I'm not mistaken, now that I'm thinking about it, I want to say you stopped, I think it was like right before Christmas. It's like right at the end of the year.
Sounds right.
And then I stopped, I want to say like September. I think I only made it like 8 months. Then I was done with it.
Was that like a buildup of like just you wanted to do so many things and you weren't sure about what to say yes to and no to and all that stuff that we just talked about?
Well, yeah. So, firstly, you know, it got to one of the factors was that, you know, like I said, the goal was never to be management. It was always to be in that capacity to be an engineer, and also be a producer. So when I was getting less sessions because I was operation manager, that was becoming a problem. Because you know, that's missing out on a lot of opportunities. There was that. Then, like I said, I was just fucking smoked from the traveling and the not sleeping well and stuff. And I have sleep problems as it is, so that was not helpful for that stuff. It got to a point where like I was like sleeping through alarms and actually showing up late to work. it was kind of giving off the vibe that I didn't give a fuck what was going on around me. I was just smoked, like we were talking about before, so that was a big part of it too. And then I was also at the point where, I knew both of those things were going to be an issue when I started the job. I knew that going in, but there was always that idea of, there is something to gain out of this. Right. So when it kind of hit that curve where it was like, all right, not really improving.
Right.
And now it's kind of not helping.
Yep.
That was kind of.
I think that's exactly the same reasons, or there's a lot of overlap.
Right.
With
exactly
what you're saying.
Exactly.
One of the other things that kind of like eventually came to mind and took me a while to get over it, but like it's not a job that you're supposed to keep. That's not how it's designed. Just by design, it's not like that. And you can be mad at it. You can fight as much as you want, but sometimes it is what it is. Right.
Yeah, totally. And the also the pay wasn't there to make it, that worthwhile. And that's how the job was totally set up. It was like, hey, I know this person isn't going to be here forever. Right. And everybody was kind of okay with that. And that was one thing too, where like I would start to get mad at like certain aspects of the job, and then realizing that was kind of a little zen, where it was like, okay, it's not against me. Yeah. Nobody's telling me to go fuck myself. It's just like, that's how it is. Right. And but then when I just couldn't deal with it anymore, that was that.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I didn't even get to that zen place until I left for 3 months and came back. And I was able to like finally look at it as like, you look at all that like you've learned being in the position and like you've grown, blah blah blah, and then all the shit that you have to go through, etc., and then you realize that like you put it really well. Like there is a tipping point to where the gain versus the what do you actually. So that took me a while to get to, and like it was such a cool moment to like be like, oh yeah, that's just how it works. Like it's supposed to cycle through.
When I was done with that job, I didn't leave on bad terms. Right. I still work in there in a couple of capacities, but I just knew that wasn't my place there.
Yeah, I definitely didn't leave on bad terms.
Right.
But in my head, I was like, fuck.
yeah.
But like, no, I mean, obviously,
because you let that stuff build up a lot longer than I did.
Dude, that's something that like I was very, and I'm still trying to get over to this day. But like I, keep that shit. I build that shit up, and like dude, the idea of going to my boss and being like, hey, I don't think I'm comfortable with it. Doesn't even register to me.
Yeah, dude, so. I totally hear you. And it was funny too, because you kind of have that mentality, and then in most cases, when you do that and you go up to the boss and say, hey, I think this could be better, or hey, I'm having a problem with this, usually there's like, yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
Do you? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And like you never think of it like that. You just kind of one of those head down, push through the shit kind of people.
Yeah,
I totally get that.
Yeah. That's so interesting. And you know what? I even at some point thought, wow, I wish somebody had told me that this is not a permanent job and it's going to eventually cycle through. But then don't think I would have learned it as well.
Right.
It just then,
because you wouldn't have pushed this hard.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So either Mark's a genius or it's dumb luck. Yeah.
We'll go with a little bit of both. Yeah.
Bader and I are still debating that. It's like, is he like really just a genius and we just don't know? Or is this like...
It's so funny because he's like right so often, and I just like, God damn it, he's right.
Damn it.
I think he was wrong one time, and I got to correct him, and I walked home like this. How you doing? How you doing? Yeah, I was fucking so stoked. It was only that one time. Man.
Oh, dude, no, I love it.
Yeah.
So, like the rent is paid like right opposite the building. Have you ever been to that?
Yep, across the street, yeah.
So the funniest thing, I don't know why this came to mind, but we were talking about Mark being right. So he had a check and he gave it to Shailene. I don't know if you've heard this story.
I vaguely remember, yeah.
So he tells Shailene, like, this has to go in tonight. Walk down the street and to your left, like, you'll eventually see a waterfall kind of.
Right.
Dude, Shailene walks like all the way to like
He went to Midtown, right? Yeah. He went like 30 blocks. It was across the street. It was like, when he said up the street, he was like one building up and one building over. And this dude was, I think it was like, what is he out for, like 4 hours?
Dude, he called Mark and he's like...
He was almost in Harlem. He's like, yo, I don't know. What the fuck? I didn't see a waterfall. What do you got?
And Mark like, dude, I needed that check-in today.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck me. Oh, and then Shailene, what an adorable kid.
He is. That's a good word for him. He is adorable.
He is adorable, bro.
Yeah, isn't he?
He's amazing. And yeah, him... Yeah, I'm still, he was here actually a few weeks ago.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, dude, he's just still the same guy. Just
yeah, I bet, yeah.
Doing his thing, man. I fucking love it. So now what? Are you just doing sessions and teaching over there?
At Engerum, yeah, pretty much.
Nice.
Yeah, I was even taking kind of like the side gigs of contracting stuff.
Nice.
I stopped doing that too. So yeah, it's pretty much teaching, and rare now it's very rarely sessions.
Right. Right.
There's not a whole bunch of stuff coming in, and it's usually the same people, so it's
Makes
usually
sense.
the same engineers. So
Totally makes sense.
yeah.
I did want to ask you about Ableton because, so as part of like the whole, me teaching at SAE, I do have to teach Ableton. Mm-hmm. So I took like a couple of months to really kind of dive into it, and just on record, I'm gonna say Ableton is fucking dope, dude.
It is. It's super dope. It's super dope.
To the point where I wonder if I should like buy it and like make it like a legitimate part of my sessions.
Yeah, I would highly recommend it, especially if you've already, like, you're in a fortunate position where you're getting paid to learn Ableton.
Yeah.
Right? So the biggest kind of turnoff for other people that are at the professional level, like Grimaldi, I was trying to talk into, this dude's making records professionally, and he doesn't have time. He's using Pro Tools. And I'm like, dude, listen, if you're in Ableton and you get good at Ableton, you will make better music. I see your workflow. I know it will be improved. I can tell you that. But at the same time, he can't take 2 or 3 months to learn Ableton, because then he's losing money, right? Mm-hmm. So you're in that fortunate position where that kind of gets offset, where you have to learn Ableton to get paid.
And it is there is a learning curve. It is not like Pro Tools.
Totally, yeah.
Right.
A lot of the concepts are similar.
Right.
But it's not as boom boom as other DAWs can be. Yeah.
But just from the ground up, it's just there. It's a different approach. So if you're so comfortable with Pro Tools, I can see why. Right.
So when I tell people to like learn Ableton that are coming from other DAWs, everybody gets thrown off by the session view with the clips in it, right? Yeah. Because that's a foreign concept, right? That's up until recently, that was really only an Ableton thing. But the reality is, you don't need to use that, right? You could just go into your arrangement view and then make a track just like you would in Pro Tools.
Right.
So that's what I always tell people. It's like, do things how it looks right to you, and then you can kind of learn that functioning as you need it, or as you get comfortable with it.
Right. No, it's an amazing DAW, and like
it really is.
It feels, and it's so hard to say because I don't know if this is just happening in my head, but it feels smoother than Pro Tools.
It is. And so I would say like this. So I started mixing in Ableton, where I used to. The way I used to do it, if I was working on other people's projects for mixing, whatever file they gave me, if it was Pro Tools, if it was Ableton, if it was Logic, I would just take it and I would just work in that session. because why am I going to reset up the session?
Sure.
But then it got to a point. The point was when they upgraded to Live 10. They added the function where you can group groups.
Oh, I didn't. So before that,
there was no grouping groups. You used to only have. You could do groups, but once the group was the top tier of that bus, essentially.
Got it.
So once they made grouping groups a thing, that was it. I'm not using Pro Tools to mix anymore because just the routing of tracks alone in Pro Tools is nonsensical. When you could just press Command G, boom, all that, highlight it, Command G, it's grouped, it's routed, audio's running through a bus, right? And you don't have to think about it,
right?
And it makes you mix better because now you can subgroup a little more frivolously,
yes,
and you have more control over your mixes. And that was it. At that point, I stopped letting people give me sessions, and I was like stems only.
Yeah.
That right there is the biggest function for me.
The grouping.
That's a huge one, and then audio effect racks, which
yes. Oh my God,
is
why?
So mind blowing, and it's such a good function that other plugin manufacturers started making it. Right, so Waves has that Wave Studio rack, which is just an Ableton audio effect rack.
Sound Toys has it. Slate has it.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And their problems is most of them you can only use with their plugins. In Ableton, any plugin goes in this rack.
It's such a mind-blowing concept, but at the same time, it's so obvious. Why wouldn't you need that?
Why wouldn't you do it? Right. And so there's two basic ways that I really liked. Well, the three basic ways I like to use audio effect racks. So firstly, just using kind of like a preset plugin chain, right? So like if you're mastering and you always start with you do a compressor, you do the same EQ, limiter, whatever. You can just take those three plugins, put them on whatever default setting you want to put them on, group them. That's an effect rack. Save. Boom.
Right.
Just not having to load up 4 plugins every time you do that. Time saved, money made, right?
Yeah.
So that's a huge function. 2, a lesser known one is you can use audio effect racks to create a wet dry knob. Have you ever done that?
I don't think so.
So that's really cool. So what you can do is create separate chains. Have you seen that before, right? So you can create separate chains in an audio effect rack.
Right.
And then you map macros, right?
Right.
So you can actually, what you do is you can map what they call the chain selector to one of the macros. Okay. So on the first chain, you put your effect, whatever it is. Because there are some plugins that don't have wet dry knobs, right? So you could put that on the first one, and then on the second one, you put no plugins, so that's your dry. So you have your wet, you have your dry. Then the chain selector...
Okay.
You can have the chain selector one chain fades into the other. So it crossfades it like this. and then it selects it like this. Boom.
That's cool.
Right. And so that's a very basic way to do that. Now you can wet dry. You could wet dry a distortion and a parallel compress signal. It doesn't even have to be a wet and a dry. It could be one thing and another thing. And then you can put multiple things on each chain. And slide between that stuff.
Ooh, I have not tried that.
Yeah, huge. The chain selector is a big one. Chain selector is a big one. So that's another good one.
That's so dope.
And then kind of just using it for like multi-mapping macros. So you can map any parameter to a macro, one knob. Right, so that you can take if you look in the Ableton's if you're on Live 10, it's under audio effect racks. They have presets there, and so this is the best way to do it. Reverse engineer it, like we were talking about before. Right. Check out a couple of their presets and see how they do it, because you can actually open the mapping and it'll tell you what knobs are mapped to what,
right, and
by what percentages they're mapped.
Sure.
So. Like they have one effect called Fade to Gray. It's my secret weapon. I use it in most of my tracks, and it's one knob. And it's this one knob, and it's attached to a 3-band EQ, and a ping pong delay. And so as you turn this one knob up, it changes all of the EQs, the filters, and the wet, dry, and the feedback all at the same time. So as you turn it up, it kind of just like fades off into nothing. And that's awesome, right? And that's a cool kind of like planned effect. So now you have one automation lane
controlling
all of those knobs.
Yeah.
Right? So that's huge. And then what you could even do is just like every now and then I'll just randomly do that. Like I'll just throw on some plugins that I like, press map and go click, 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 and just see what the fuck happens. And then you can start adjusting it. And so this is what's really great about Ableton that you don't get out of a lot of other DAWs, especially not Pro Tools, right? If you have Pro Tools, you have to know exactly what you want to do, and you can do it. Right? You have to say, I want this result, and this will be how I get there. With Ableton, it's just creative accidents, right? You can just press buttons, and it'll just shit stuff out at you, and then you just take something that you like. Which is creatively speaking is huge. And so you'll come up with these kind of effects that no one else can have because. You just kind of that you couldn't even make again if you wanted to.
It's a very unique chain of
so that's what's really cool. So audio effect racks, absolutely huge, and they actually made some upgrades to the audio effect racks, which are really nice. So they changed how the macros are set up. You can do more or less macros, which is really cool. Because and it's really just something how you look at it, because the way audio effect racks are now, if you have a macro, like even if you only want one macro, it shows you 8 macros, and you just kind of have those 7 dead macros. You can change the view now to just have 1 macro or 2 macros, or 4 macros, and it's cool. It's not huge, but it kind of is at the same time, because it just cleans shit up, and that's so big too. And they did a couple other cool things with the audio effect racks that I haven't dove into yet, but
and 11 has now the playlisting feature.
Huge, right? So you can playlist in comp.
You said it's better than Pro Tools?
Yes. So there's some. So they have some like latching functions which are kind of cool. And maybe Pro Tools kind of has this stuff, and I've just never dove into it that deep. But they have it so first off, you can easily break playlist out into a new track. You can take stuff and then make it into playlist that's already been recorded, like take stuff from other tracks and put them into playlist.
Right.
And so like one example that they show, if you watch the demo for 11, they instead of like when you comp stuff together, you redo the same take 8 times and take the best part of each take.
Sure.
Well, one way they use it is they take 8 different drum loops, put them on each playlist, and then it shuffles through the playlist to take different parts of each drum loop out.
Ooh.
Right? And right? I know. That's what I said. And so after I saw that, I was like, I think you could do that in Pro Tools, right? I don't. You might not be able to do that. You have to create the playlist first, and maybe you can drag the audio into there.
That's the only way to do it.
Right, but it's I don't know, it's just not as fluid. Like you would never even think to do that in Pro Tools.
Right.
And Ableton's like, hey guy, why aren't you doing this? So that's a huge function too. I'm a big fan of that, which is great because before that came out, so like I said, the grouping groups shifted me from mixing in Pro Tools to mixing in Ableton. Now that function is there, now that you can playlist and comp, I'm probably going to be doing a lot more recording in Ableton as well.
Makes sense.
Because previously the only time I would record in Ableton is if I had, it's like, hey, I'm doing a guitar lead and I'm just going to kind of, and it was kind of a pain in the ass to do comp takes of it.
Yeah.
Because you could do like a loop record thing. but then you would have to like cut it and manually put it on different tracks. But yeah, now it's there.
And 11 is still in beta?
Beta, yeah. Usually, I want to say they'll probably come out with it around spring, if I had to guess. I don't know. I'm not an Ableton representative. I don't know how that stuff works, but
dude, I'm thinking of buying the Live 10 suite. It's great.
So yeah, okay, so that's a good conversation too. You might not even need suite.
Really?
It depends on what you're looking for. So what I would do if I were you, look at the they have like that checklist of
thing?
The main thing that you really get out of suite, there's a couple of plugins, there's a couple stock plugins, which is stuff that you probably don't need because you have you have your workflow in place. The real big thing that you get out of having suite is it comes with Max for Live. Are you familiar with that at all?
Very little.
So basically, the idea with Max for Live is it's kind of like this. It's a GUI based programming software. Mm-hmm. So you can make your own plugins kind of based off of just like knobs and stuff instead of dialing code in and stuff, and you still have to do some kind of little bits of code thing, and it's the way you route signal flow to these different things is actually like drawing a line from one thing to another, right? And so it's one of those things in and of itself. If you want to get into plugin development, it's a really good way to do that. And like a lot of times you might run into a situation where you're like, I don't have a plugin that can do this crazy thing that I just made up in my head. Mm-hmm. And with Max for Live, you can do that. And even better yet, most of the time, you don't have to because somebody else already did. So the Ableton's code is very open source. Mm-hmm. And so what ends up happening is people make Max for Live plugins, and they kind of just put them up on the internet. Right. And even if you pay, sometimes you buy the ones that you want, and like I've bought a couple. I've never spent more than $5. Mm-hmm. Usually it's like a couple dollars, and those things expand the functionality of Ableton to an infinite plane, because now you can do whatever somebody can imagine, it can happen, right? So Max for Live is really, really cool. Is it worth that price difference?
What is the price difference? Like $300?
Something like that. I want to say it's in that ballpark. But you'll probably get like upgrade pricing, and if like take advantage of the educational pricing.
Sure.
That'll save you a shitload of money.
Yeah.
Weigh that out yourself.
I think I can get the full suite for like $450, $500, something like that.
Yeah, it's not bad.
It's not terrible.
It took me a couple of years to do this, but I got Ableton Suite. I think it cost me like $300.
Shit.
And the way I did it was I like slowly upgraded from the free version, and I kind of just traded up, like waited for sales and stuff like that. Yeah, and then I got myself up to Suite. It was funny because I actually the first time I had to pay like I paid more to upgrade from 9 Suite to 10 Suite than I did to get to 9 Suite.
Wow.
Yeah.
Weird.
So you can kind of do that if you're patient for it.
Fuck that.
Oh, another really cool thing, and a couple other DAWs do this. So there's like Bitwig does this. So Bitwig is another cool DAW if you want to check some stuff out. That gives you a little more technical dive. I think a couple of the guys who made Ableton broke off and made their own DAWs. But,
nice.
So with Max for Live, they have a couple of things like LFOs, and they also have CV tools. Let's talk about the LFOs and envelopes first. So you can take, so an LFO, a low frequency oscillator, and it's just a modulation source. It's just something that can change a knob, right? You can take, this is, with Suite, you can take an LFO and apply it to any parameter, right? So you can turn any parameter of any plugin, not just Ableton stock, third party too. You can now you have an LFO for that, which you can do whatever you want with, or you can take an envelope and do whatever you want with. Right. So I mean that is just, it's gigantic. It's gigantic, and it's like a really good example of that, right? Maybe somebody sent me something to mix, and this is not even from the production standpoint, right? Somebody sent me something to mix, and they kind of used a really basic kind of vanilla synth that doesn't have a lot of flavor on it. Maybe I want to put a little vibrato on it. Now I can take that, even if it's a stem, I could put a utility plugin with a gain knob, take an LFO, put it to that gain knob and it's just gonna tremolo. Yeah, and it'll do that automatically. You don't have to do that automation, right? Insane. And that's a super basic function of that.
Right.
Doing that like a really slow LFO to kind of increase reverb sends.
Oh my god, that's pretty cool. That's a great idea.
Right, and you don't even have to sync it to time, so it does it randomly, or you can sync it, and it'll do it, every quarter, whatever you want to do. And so that's huge.
Yeah.
Huge, right?
Pretty awesome.
So that even just that plug alone, and I haven't dove super deep into Max for Live like I should have. I started for a while, and I was like, this is going to be a lot of brain power that I'm going to need to really learn this.
Yeah.
But they have a lot of really cool plugins that just do even like like utilitarian functions where they have like MIDI splitters, where you could play a chord on one channel and it will send the first note to one synth, the second note to another, and the third note to another.
Right.
This is huge, right? And so like if you need that kind of like and then all the other MIDI stuff that those Max for Live plugins can do, ridiculous. That's another great thing that Ableton has a lot. So Ableton has it, Logic has it, not as good. Pro Tools doesn't have it at all. MIDI effects, MIDI effect plugins that change MIDI messages, not just audio.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah. It's brilliant.
Huge.
Arpeggiators and all that shit.
Right.
Scale shits. Yeah. It's awesome.
Huge.
Fucking awesome.
Even just like the velocity randomizers, the pitch changers, it's huge. All this stuff's great. But then they have CV tools.
So what's that?
So you see, like I have let me get this over here.
We didn't do the studio tour.
Oh, you want?
Yeah.
Well, all right, let's do a studio tour real quick. Let's take this guy off here. All right, so we'll go. We'll go over here first. What are we looking at? So here is my modular synth rack. Oh, this way. Okay, modular synthesizer.
Nice.
I have this. Let's see. Can you see? There's enough light there.
Yeah.
So I have this studio furniture, which was such a great purchase.
Nice.
Output platform. So it's got a bunch of space for rack gear, which I'm still working on. I'm going to put some more synthesizers there. Of course, I have my little bar cart situation, so I could mix drinks when needed. So these are all modular synthesizers. Then we have reflection filter, which is super important for any home recording. Extra chair, some patch cables. Okay, so let's look at the desk. Hey, hi. There you are. Over here, so my monitors, I'm rocking these Dynaudio LYD 48s.
Nice.
They're pretty solid.
Yeah.
I'm liking them. Still getting used to them. I put them on stands and I tilted them down to kind of reduce the standing waves, which, by the way, huge difference. To tilt them. I was running into some real standing wave issues where some of these low frequencies were kind of building up, but now that it's on an angle,
interesting.
The waves aren't.
Yeah.
It's just the reflections aren't as symmetrical, right?
Right.
So I got that stuff. I got my patch bay, my kind of little mic input panel, all patch cables and whatnot. So this thing, You probably like this. I don't know if you've seen this before. The Soft-Tube Console 1.
Maybe.
So what this is, it's from Soft-Tube. It's a MIDI controller that controls certain plugins. So like you would need like Soft-Tube has a Console 1 plugin, and what it has is it comes with console channel strip emulations. So like it comes with the SSL console, like a 4000G, or you can get like their API version or whatever. And so if you look at it, it's just got all the kind of channel strip stuff you need. You have dynamic compressors, EQ, and so you get console workflow, and you could just change through the different channels on here and mix as if you were on a console.
Right.
Really cool.
That's cool.
It has drive characteristics for each of the channels.
Wow.
And each of the channels is a different modulation of, or a different
different drive, different type of
it's
drive?
a different like model of a different channel.
Dude, that's fucking dope.
Yeah, this is new. I just got this. I haven't got this in my workflow as much as I want to, but it's phenomenal. It also seamlessly controls UAD plugins.
Ooh.
And so what you can do is, like, if you have a UAD compressor and a UAD EQ, you can actually change, like you could have the EQ from the API, and then you could have the, compressor from SSL or whatever plugins you have. And so you can control your plugins while, like, especially if you're using UAD stuff, you know how you have to go back and forth between the console and the DAW? You don't have to do that. It'll just do that. So that's big.
Shit, that's awesome.
I got my Novation Peak synthesizer here. It's a polyphonic synthesizer. It's my first big boy polysynth. Loving it. So the main difference, people ask like a lot, like, do you like, are analog synthesizers, do they really give you that? Is it that big of a deal?
Right.
But yes and no. The two big things, you will get a little more, I think you get a little more low end. It's a little bit fatter. Digital synths can sound a little thin. The main thing is the workflow. Yeah. Turning knobs and having those performance aspects. Touching it is different than how you use it with a mouse. 100% of the time. Right?
Absolutely.
So like that's huge. Plus I use it for a lot of my bigger sounds that are typically CPU intensive.
Makes sense.
So it pulls off a lot of stress on my computer.
Right.
Interfaces, I'm using a UAD system here. I have a X16.
Of course.
And a Twin. I won't go too much into that. MIDI control, I have an Ableton Push. This is a really, really good way to interact with Ableton.
Yeah, I've seen these.
I'm not as good as other people are at this, but like if you get really good at Push, you almost don't need to use your mouse and keyboard.
Right, that's what I've heard.
You can really get through it, and again, more hands-on functions that you can get to add a performance aspect into your, recording is going to be a lot better.
Right.
This guy too. So
is that Art?
This is Art Pro. I don't know if the screen's backwards or whatever, but this is the Art Pro Pro Channel 2. It's it's just a channel strip. So it's got preamp, compressor, and EQ. I just wanted to have some analog sound, and again to have a little more control on knobs that I have.
Sure.
I really like this thing, and it was really cheap. So this thing, I think this cost me. I got it used for, I think it was $250. And it's a opto tube.
Oh, nice.
Right, so it's a tube amp with an opto compressor.
Yeah.
So that's what you're looking for, Yeah. So this thing's pretty good. I don't use it as much as I should, simply because I'm rocking the UAD system, and it's I don't need to use anything else.
UAD's pretty good.
Yeah, it's solid, man.
Pretty good.
I can't complain. What else is good here? I got a couple of guitars that I don't know how to play. I got my my vinyl collection. Woo! Yeah. I'm a DJ, and I felt that it was wrong for me to be calling myself a DJ and
without some vinyls.
Vinyl, yeah. This guy I just got.
Is that a Korg?
This is the Arturia
Oh shit!
88 Mark II. This thing is a monster.
Oh my god!
The weighting on it really cool.
Yeah.
It's not exactly a real piano, which is good for synthier stuff,
right?
Because you want a little more snap on it.
Yeah.
Great. Comes with a lot of modulation sources. One of the big sells on this, which we'll talk about again in a minute, is CV. But then it also has sustain and modulation pedal inputs.
Nice.
So, like, using a modulation pedal, which I don't know if you use that, so huge. So that's like down here, this guy. You've seen these, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
So those are really good because it basically adds another modulation source to what you can touch and move and use and stuff.
Right. There's another performance aspect to it again.
Exactly. So like a mod wheel, but like a mod wheel takes your hand.
Yeah.
Whereas this is just an extra foot, you know.
Yeah. It's great.
So you can still play two-handed chords and stuff and ride a filter.
Yeah.
Which
it's
is,
like
it's huge.
It's like guitar wah pedals and stuff.
Right.
Same thing. Yeah.
But for any parameter.
Right.
Because now this keyboard can translate that to MIDI.
Yeah.
And now I could attach that to any parameter in Ableton.
Fucking crazy, dude.
Right.
Jesus
right.
Christ.
I know. And
That's a dope setup.
Just having that has changed. First off, it changes how much work I have to do, which now, like, none. I get these really cool floaty pads, and I'm just moving my foot, and I don't have to sit there and fucking automate shit. And it's just, mind blowing. But so let's talk about CV.
Yeah, CV. What is that?
Right. So if you're not familiar with modular gear, I'll turn this on so you get some lights and stuff. Basically, when we're talking about modular synthesizers, it's just saying that you can make a synthesizer piece by piece. Right. So if you buy a synthesizer, it has oscillators, it has envelopes, it has LFOs, and it has filters. Right. And more often than not, those things kind of have a signal flow and they interact in a certain way.
Sure.
So with this kind of stuff, with a modular setup, you can buy each of those individual pieces.
Right.
And so even though this is just a case, right? So this is a case that supplies power. These things are not talking to each other at all.
Right.
Right. So you actually have to hardwire patch cables, right, to get one thing to go to another, right?
Right.
So it gives you a lot of control and creativity out of the sound that you can create. Especially because now I have different brands, right? Yeah. So it's this brand's filter with that brand's oscillator. It's not just such a straightforward sound, right? So the way these kind of things work, there's two signals. There's the audio signal, which is just like your regular signal flow. You just think of audio, and then there's CV or control voltage. So there's a voltage that is not audio that tells things what to do. Right.
Oh, right.
So an LFO is modulating something.
Right.
But it's not audio, right?
Correct.
So LFO.
That's an example of a CV?
Well, yes. In this situation, that would be outputting CV. Like if you do that in Ableton, that's MIDI.
Right.
Right. So control voltage is actual voltage. Now, the big advantage to voltage over MIDI is digital. So it's stepped.
Yeah. Yeah.
Control voltage is analog. Right, so not stepped.
Right.
So that's all well and cool. The big issue that you run into with modular systems is that it's very hard to recreate things.
Sure.
And you can't really you can't automate it, right? Because it's all analog.
Right.
Until recently. So when Ableton came out with Live 10. And I'll put this back over here. When they came out with Live 10, they added CV tools. So CV tools allows you to output control voltage from an audio interface. So now I could write automation in Ableton.
Yes.
And it's the same as if I turn these knobs.
Yes.
Right? And also vice versa, I could record control voltage. And now I can turn these knobs and save the automation.
Oh, shit.
Right? And so...
That's so cool.
Right. And so these systems used to be really kind of niche because, you know, you really, like, first off, it's like it's really hard to understand it.
Yeah.
But you know, it's very, in a sense, unpredictable or like you can't recreate things, right?
Yeah.
But now you kind of can, and now you can link, and this is a really cool function with it too. Is now you can link control voltages with digital synthesizers. So, and vice versa. So now you can, even if you wanted to, if you wanted to back up a sound, if you wanted to do some layering, but you wanted the filters to ride exactly the same or whatever, you can sync that stuff up.
Right.
Which is huge. And so that's what we were talking before we started. We were talking about how I kind of have a weird setup.
I was just gonna say
on my patch bay.
Yeah.
So the thing with CV, you can't just use any audio interface. It has to have what's called DC coupled outputs.
Okay.
And so there's AC coupled and DC coupled. So DC, direct current, right? It's a much smoother, more predictable voltage, which makes it good for exactly what we're talking about. The vast majority of audio interfaces are not DC coupled because it's not it's just not necessary, right? So Universal Audio, their interfaces are DC coupled, so that's why I leaned into the Apollo system so hard. So the way I have my patch bay set up, and actually I made a custom little patch bay. I don't know if you can see this down here.
Yeah, I noticed it. Yeah, the one.
Right?
Yeah.
So that is attached to my patch bay, and what that does, I've basically normaled my first 10 outputs of Ableton to that little CV patch bay, and so now I can go right out of Ableton into whatever I need to go into.
Right.
And then I also kind of put some 1/4 inches in here to just for audio as well. And that's another thing that you can do too. Like we were talking before about how digital synths might sound a little thin. So you know how like if you do that with like a guitar, you might reamp a guitar to kind of give it an analog sound. What you can do is if you have, so this is a Euro rack format, which is different than line level. But if you have a converter that goes from Euro rack to line level and vice versa, what you can do is take your digital synthesizer, output the audio through your analog synth chain, and then use those analog effects and just kind of run it back in, and now your digital synth has analog effects.
Yeah.
And so like I have these so Behringer, which is notoriously like not a great brand. They I don't even know how they do it legally, but they stepped up their game where they recently started recreating classic synths in a Eurorack format and in desktop formats. They do super cheap, which is, Behringer's kind of thing. And I think that with most, if not all of them, they like hired the engineers who created those original synths, so they're very faithful. And they're super fucking cheap. Wow. So these modules here, so this is a voltage controlled, a VC low pass filter, and a voltage controlled high pass filter. So it's a low pass filter and a high pass filter that I can modulate the cutoffs on, right? These are remakes the Moog, what is it, the 50 series? You ever see the giant wall of Moogs?
Yeah.
Right? So basically they took all of those modules, shrunk them down,
No
and
way.
then started reselling them at a fucking fraction of the cost. So like Moog just re-released that kind of wall of synths, and you can get them for like 30 grand. If you recreate that same kind of thing with faithful circuitry through the Behringer system, it'll cost you $1,500,
Wow.
maybe $2,000.
Holy
So like I
shit.
bought these filters. These are Moog recreation filters, and they sound like Moog ladder filters, which is like the sound. And now I could run like digital synths or analog synths through them, right? So it's a creatively speaking, especially like if you're into sound design.
Right.
And then I have like down here, so this, let me show you this down. I don't know if you can see this. This guy down here, this is the Moog Mother 32. This is what we would call a semi-modular synthesizer. Mm-hmm. So unlike up here where I have like different modules, that's it's a VCO and that's an envelope generator. This has all of that stuff kind of built into it. It has oscillator, like just like you would expect out of a normal synthesizer, but it has patch points so you can patch in or out of it. Mm-hmm. So now you can expand this system with that
using
system.
a modular. Yeah.
So like if you know like Stranger Things, a lot of the sound design was done with that. They had a couple of those. The big downside to modular systems is, and this is only a downside if you consider it a downside, they're pretty much monophonic, right? In order to make it polyphonic, right, like one oscillator can play one note. So if you want to make it polyphonic, you have to have 3 oscillators to play 3 notes. And then you need kind of 3 of everything, right? So you need 3 oscillators, 3 envelopes, and so on and so forth to make it polyphonic. And then you have to figure out a way to get it so one of 3 notes gets sent to each different one, which is we were talking about before, right? That's why that's such a huge max for live function, because it now can do that, which I couldn't figure out an effective or at least in a cheap way to do it. So it's the possibilities of that are just, I mean, they're endless. And then another cool thing I did too, the CV, so the audio interfaces are outputting line level, or they're balanced, I should say, not necessarily line level, balanced. But modulate, like CV is not balanced, it's unbalanced. I see. So what I did when I made this patch bay is I took, so output number 1, I took it and I split it into a positive and a negative. And so now I have, the inverted of the same modulation source. So I could, invert stuff all over the place and do crazy stuff like that.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's funny because I was like, when I built this setup, my idea, and this was where I really decided I have to put some money into this, is I wanted to make it to a point where I don't want to hit a point where I'm like, oh, I wish I could do this. Right. I want everything to, like, the way I have to set it up now has to be beyond my capability of creativity at this point, because down the road I want to be able to do something that I can't even think of now. Right. So that's why I kind of just went balls to the wall and started making stuff like, I guess I'll just maybe need that. So yeah, that's the kind of the gist of this stuff. And then this keyboard too, which is really cool, has CV modulation output. So I could even take my mod wheel and have it control.
Hook it up to one of those
parameters. Man. Yeah, with just a patch cable.
I mean, it's all in the hope, or rather the faith, that it'll expand creativity, because you're not worrying about how to get to. Yeah, that totally. Makes sense.
I can't tell you how, and it's funny, because I was having engine room at my disposal, I have all this high quality vintage gear that I, personally I'll never be able to afford. But, it takes me 2 hours to set up, 2 hours to break down, and, I might only get a couple hours of work, and then by the time I'm done setting up, I'm kind of like, I'm over it. So kind of having it in a situation where shit just works, and there it is, and it's been really big for me, like creatively speaking. And, it's still a work in progress, because like even the way I have things set up now, like I'm gonna move that synth. I might move things around just to kind of make it make more sense to me, but
less obstacles in the way of
like even like, so I have this like I showed you the input panel before, where it's just 10 combo jacks, which just go into my patch bay essentially. Like I don't record, I'm not recording a band here, I don't need 10 combo jacks, I don't need 10 XLRs, but even if I just need 1 or 2 microphones, I don't have to think about it. It's just like boom, 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 and it's there. And who knows where I'm going to be in 2 years. Maybe I will want to maybe I will need 10 microphones. I don't, and now I have the stuff available. But
dude, that's a pretty dope setup.
Thanks, man. It's been a long time in the making. A lot of this is, I've been collecting this gear for years and years, and just kind of expanding on it. But it's finally kind of at a point where I'm like comfortable just to create. Like I can sit down in front of this thing and just plug stuff in and push. Like I could just have it play one note out of Ableton.
Right.
And I don't have to press anything, and I'm just kind of doing the patching, and it's giving me stuff that I didn't know how to do, or I didn't know could exist. And then what's really cool about that too is now when we have LFOs and envelopes and all these kind of things that are built into Ableton, now it gets me thinking different, where I'm like, okay, well, if I'm using the LFO to affect this here, maybe I can have that LFO affect that there. And so that, like I said, that creatively speaking, it's doing something that I could never possibly do.
And is that like the next kind of frontier you're focusing on, is the more creativity now that the studio's all up?
That's for me, it's production and getting back into like DJing. Well, I never really like stopped DJing. I stopped doing gigs. Because the way that kind of community is, a lot of people have this misconception that all DJs are producers and all producers are DJs. But that's totally not how it is. But you're kind of forced to do that, right? Because, I'm sure, as you know, selling music doesn't really make money. It doesn't, like, unless you're in that top 0.01%, selling music doesn't make money. So gigs make money. So if you're a producer, you kind of have to DJ to get make a living. But at the same time, you can't really get those good DJ gigs unless you have that digital following where you're making your own music or have your own style. So they do tend to overlap. So for a while, I was like, I'm a pretty good DJ. Let me stop DJing out as much and worrying about getting gigs and stuff and spend more time on my production. But until it gets to that level, and I think my production's at that level now. For me, it's just a matter of volume, right? Can't make one song every 2 months. It's not going to cut it. Not in any genre.
Right.
So I have to put out some volume, and then my quality is real close. And now I'm actually at the point where, going back to what we were talking about way earlier, mixing and mastering your own stuff. I'm at the point where I'm like, maybe I can't be doing that. And so, like, the song I'm working on right now, what I'm going to do with it is I'm actually going to tone my mixing back a little bit. that I've done on it to make it sound a little less mixed. So to make it sound more like a demo, and then I'll shop that out in the hopes that, you know, like, okay, hey, the music's there, but the sound is off. I don't want the, but at the same time, you know, I don't want them to be like, oh, this guy kind of ruined it by not mixing it well, you know?
Right.
So, you know, I'm trying to find that line too. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Dude, that's fucking awesome.
Right, yeah.
No, that's awesome, dude. And look, thanks for spending some time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a good time, man.
Take up too much of it. Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah, definitely, dude. All right, so we're cool? We're done?
Yeah, let's call it.